Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I am Mary Kim. I am a senior consultant at Bridge Innovate. Bridge Innovate is a boutique consulting agency. I'm staring at Lookout Mountain out there. We are right at the border of Tennessee and Georgia and the greater Chattanooga region. And a lot of the work we focus on is around business innovation using design thinking, change, leadership, strategic foresight. Today, you are visiting us as our second episode of Inspire series. We are generating content this year as the new decade kicks off to help you get inspired, innovate. So we are putting together a series with Impact Leader, and we're excited to have Owen Foster joining us today to talk about solving innovation challenge with design thinking. Owen, will you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
My name is Owen Foster. I'm, educator for over a decade, multiple backgrounds in design. And right now, one of my titles is Director of Innovation for the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga.
Wonderful. Thank you, Owen. So I know today we're here to talk all about design thinking. So I know you have quite deep background in the design industry. So could you share, for those of you that might be not as familiar, or to share in your own terms, how do you define design thinking and what does that process look like for you?
Design thinking is a process that allows you to go in a wider, you could say almost initial thought processes. Instead of very linear, we go wide, come in, and then go back out, come in. And it's a step process that allows you to find new questions. I think that's the biggest impact that design thinking has. It allows you to peel back the onion a little bit more. And I guess the best analogy that I have, because there's thousands of different ways of doing it, and you'll see a lot of step-by-step processes, but imagine a creek or a stream that has stepping stones across it. The stepping stones are what most people will see as the process. It's not, it's the water. The water can carry you forward, backwards, swirl you around for a minute. You might not even know where you're going to end up. The rocks are the moments where you stand up, you see it, you reflect on it, you analyze it, and then you jump back in the water for more creativity and more inspiration. And it allows you to flow back and forth through a methodology that opens up doors that a lot of different processes do not allow.
One of the things that we talk about at Bridge Innovate is because design thinking is, a lot of people call it a human-centered design approach. And through the process of being user or human-centered, we are able to, like you mentioned, meet those unmet things that people are needing or wanting, or could be their pain point. So just to throw out a stat out there, because that's one of the things I tend to do, is that Design Management Institute has released multiple reports, but one of the stats that they share is that design oriented companies perform 219% higher in S&P curve. So I think that has a lot to say with what are these design-oriented companies that, many of them use design thinking. How are they using the process to solve? So, Owen, what have you seen out there? Well, how are these companies utilizing design thinking to solve the, we're talking about innovation challenges. What do you see out there?
I think design thinking actually opens up almost the empathy gene as you go through it. Companies are now understanding that they need input from the customer more than the customer needs input from them. And when they're going through this process, again, it's opening up new questions, not necessarily always a new answer right at first, because most people jump to that. And a lot of those are by business are driven by biases or assumptions, things like that, where the design process and design thinking allows for more of the discovery moments at the start. And I think the quicker you get to the right questions to ask, the faster you get to a better and more memorable solution for the customer. And I think that's where companies were struggling for a while, because the aspect of business was a little bit different. In today's world, because everything's connected and everyone's educated to a certain degree, you really have to get to the root of what you're trying to do. And I think once businesses adapt and then adopt to the design thinking process, they can start looking toward the future a little bit more, a little bit clearer, and then you can bring back what's invisible to most people and most companies and then deliver it to the population.
Interesting. So this discovery of, you talked about empathy and you talked about discovery. Is there a company or organization that comes to your mind have been successful, or maybe the opposite case that have just, flopped on the other end because they didn't really explore these empathy, and you're talking about, understanding the customer. What do you see?
Okay, so probably one of the best examples that I can bring forth, and it's going to sound kind of strange, is Nike. Nike was or is known for shoes, right? Most people look at Nike like, oh, it's sports equipment, it's this, it's that. Well, I think because they're still a creative company, most people are like, well, then they've already been doing it. But no, they actually started looking at a broader scope. They started using the principles of design thinking more than just the creative stroke to make a new shoe. Their motto now is, how can they take a ball and make the world better? So they started looking at different cultures, at different people, at different communities, different countries. And how can they just drop a simple ball, not designated for any sport, just a ball? And they started connecting people to families, to communities, to countries, to the world. And so they've taken their platform, used the design thinking processes, and reestablished themselves as a global leader in world good. And that to me is a prime example of how a company can diversify and grow when they're already possibly the leader of an industry. And then I've seen some companies, which I won't name the bad ones, that are so set in what they think they already know that they can't grow. And they refuse to see the differences between what they used to think or what used to be accepted to what it is today. And they start folding. They start struggling. They start having massive layoffs because they're not reaching their potential, because they're not examining or exploring new possibilities.
Interesting. You mentioning reaching potential, and I think maybe I'll start with myself, and I would kind of ask you to maybe piggyback on that. One of the favorite steps, I would say, of design thinking process that I really appreciate is what at Bridge Innovate we call inspiration. Other people call discovery, or where you really start to build that empathy piece, like you said. And often I think the challenging part is, how do you build empathy, and having the tools or a framework in which people can utilize to gain that skill. And people just think like, oh, you're either an empathetic person or you're not. But I think it's a skill that we learn, that you can certainly gain that skill to be more empathetic, especially towards your audience, your customer. And I learned, these observation things, like where what people say might not exactly be same as how they feel. And I think we're all guilty of that, even answering survey questions, which is why it's so important to go beyond just having, surveying 1,000 people and hoping, thinking that you understand your customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's my favorite piece. I think really being able to dig deep into who your customer is, why they do what they do, right? Understanding their behavior, because humans just are, we're just creatures of habit, as people say. So what is your favorite step in the design thinking process?
So as a designer, you would think it's the concepting phase, because that's where we get to play. We get to do sketches. We get to make models. We get to go as crazy as we want to be. Yes, that's one of my favorite spots. But I'll agree with you. It's challenging myself to walk in someone else's shoes. Sometimes I might not be the most empathetic person in my everyday life, because I have set ways, because I've already gotten too old to change, I think. But when it comes to a design process, and when I jump into it, I try to take all of my biases away. It's hard. And I think that's what really drives me is you have to unlearn everything that you know about a topic or about people or about whatever that theme is and relearn it as if you were a 5-year-old and looking at the world from a child's eyes of, wow, everything is shiny, everything is important, everything I want to touch, smell, twist, turn, break, all of those things. And I think that drives the whole process. And once you're playing in that and you try to drop yourself into another situation by trying to figure out, what do they hear? What do they see? What do they do? What do they believe? Where are the frictions in their life? Because a lot of times we go through the process and people only think about the positive roadmap, right? But I don't know anyone's life that is perfectly without friction. And I think if you go through the process of trying to find where are the pain points in real life, because like you said, Mary, is people aren't going to tell you everything that's in them. They're going to tailor sometimes the surveys to what they think you want. And if you can get past that and you can break that barrier, that's the aha moment that you build everything off of. And I think that's the most important and probably the most fun because sometimes it's the most challenging.
Yeah, I think it's um, getting harder and harder to find that nugget of information that surprises you. So more and more that information gathering phase become important. And I think it's interesting because now we're talking a little bit on individual level. I, want to hear from your perspective, how does design thinking get, best implemented in a team setting? Because I know that often some of our audience might feel this too. If they have tried to implement design thinking organization wide, there's pushback. People don't
Mm-hmm.
always understand the value of why it is needed. So how do you, how have you seen, design thinking best implemented in like a team or organization setting? Two, I'm asking you these tough questions. If your team is not bought into design thinking, how do you communicate that? What is the key value that you think is crucial to a business or organization being successful?
So I don't know if I'm going to answer these in the correct order,
No
but
worries.
the the one thing I see is, yes, learning a new process and putting it into something that's been going well for a lot of companies, because a lot of times we are already making money. Why would we want to change? It's really doing well. Well, that's not the whole point, because as we've seen over the past 15 years, look at the major giants that have died in all types of industry because they weren't willing to look beyond what they do today. And I think one of the more, what I've experienced in running little workshops is, yes, you get friction, but as soon as the team sees that aha moment of, wow, I've never thought that way, you've got your in. So if you're working with a company or working within a company, try to find where you can break the armor, put a little crack in that big, huge dam that says no. And once it starts leaking, then you can start implementing things, just small things. Take the process and break it down. Maybe it's bite sizes because some companies don't want to dive in and put all the resources into something that they're unsure of or that they don't really understand. So, as we say with the empathy mapping, uh, breaking that down into any process of coming up with new products can be that aha moment for a lot of people in the room. And then you start adding a little bit more and a little bit more. And once your team or you build that confidence and build that rapport of, I kind of know how this can go, you're going to start seeing upper management open up just a little bit more and a little bit more. But warning too, you don't just go in there, we have to do this whole process right now, because they're going to try to learn the vocabulary and then they're going to go back to the everyday world because pressure happens, right? You got to make money. So find those little pieces that make the biggest difference and then start building on those as you go.
I really like that approach because you're right. I think it can be really challenging when you are jumping into tackling really big things and say, we're going to try this completely, maybe not completely new, but a new approach. which I know that especially for larger organization, that is a huge effort into, maybe they had an existing process, but maybe it's not getting them to where they need to be, and continuous innovation that needs to happen to just be caught up in all the things that are happening out there. But like you said, those small wins where you can, and I think that actually speak to the process of design thinking, where you're continuously iterating, prototyping. And we always say, always start with a piece of paper for prototyping, right? Low scale. So I think that really speaks to a lot of people that might be looking to start this initiative, maybe individually or within a small group, is look for those opportunities for small win, maybe small experiments, and continue to build buy-in within the organization is what I hear.
Right, and I've got an example. I just got through working with a company that is all engineers. They make equipment for a lot, like a large platform, and mainly around securities. And they have all the facilities to prototype. Big, huge, anything they can prototype, but it always comes out looking like a box every single time. And I said, stop that, because you're not going to be creative anymore. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, we're going to use this ream of paper. And like, but we can't build what we need to. I'm like, why can't you build what you need to? It's about up here and forming it and seeing it and touching it that stimulates the creativity, not bringing in a massive thing that you've seen over and over and over because you know how to build it. So I made the whole team just mock up with paper. And it's like, we've never seen that curve. No, because you've never built it into a box. And so it's really funny that the smallest things can make the biggest difference.
It's a great story. So let's, hear a little bit about what you're doing now. So you are, one of the leading educator faculty for the Honors College, especially in the Innovation and Honors program. And I heard from the grapevines that you are using design thinking for as a process for students to solve tough social innovation challenges. And I think, like you said, design thinking can be as small scale as you need to be and quite large. How is that going, and how has the process worked for the team so far?
So it started off rough, let's just say that, because I work with honor students that have always been top academics, and they've always had a roadmap to what makes an A. Well, in design thinking, there is no true roadmap. We can diverge and go any direction at any time. And I told them it's a very fluid methodology. It's unsettling to that type of individual where they're wanting the A, they want to make sure they have this, and then they're scared to take risk. And I think that's the biggest lesson we learned in the first portions of take risk, stop worrying about it. Because I told them instantly, I don't even know what an A looks like, so let's just get over that hurdle. And of course, it's like, what? But as we kept going and as more friction hit them, and as I was pushing and showing them the different tools, it's amazing how the light bulb starts. It flickers, goes off, and then it starts staying on a little bit more and a little bit more. And right now we're in our second wave of using this in a social good project. And now they're getting it. Now they want to go talk to more people. Now they want to start peeling back the onions of what questions can we ask? What can we do? And we haven't even got to the fun creative part yet because they're so excited about finding more information. And I'm hoping at the end of the day, because none of these students are wanting to go in true design. They're all from engineering, they're from med school, they are from criminal justice. I've got them across the spectrum of the campus. And they're all going to be able to take it back to use it to better their own disciplines and use it for problem solving and creative thinking all the way through their life. So I'm trying to use it as the catalyst to whenever they want to change or do something different or build off of their own careers as they get in the 30s and 40s, these lessons can be used across any platform. And that's the biggest takeaway, I think. They're going to do great projects and they're going to be proud of what they deliver at the end. But it's more of, can you take this into everyday life and create better math, How do you approach science differently? How do you approach arts differently, right? And why can't we use this in the political realm? We can. It doesn't matter. And so I think that's the biggest lessons they're learning right now.
Great. And I love hearing about the discovery. We talked a lot about discovery today, but from the student's perspective, how design thinking can be used in so many different areas, like you said, in engineering or even just finishing an assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that as well, I think, through the Bright Spark program, which is Bridge Innovates educational program for, elementary all the way up to college level. And I remember after learning about design thinking, one of the students said, "Oh, I wish I would have known about this process earlier. Could have done a really good job in my science project." And
Right.
it just hit me. I think the barrier tends to be low, I guess, with age. It's funny that, like you said, we do get asked a lot by corporations and organizations to help make their employees, their leaders creative. And in some ways, I think the system that we are in now tends to kind of take away as people get older, people gain more experience. Sometimes people say experience the opposite of innovation because of that, because we get comfortable with it. And I think it's great that you are taking part in helping these young professionals learn that process to help them be more creative, think outside the box, as we say. And we've seen a huge kind of ROI in, teaching our youth, young students, that process as well, and actually inspiring the adults that see their ideas in return. And that's been really a great kind of feel good. At the same time, these students I can't wait to work for them one day.
Right. That's exactly the way I look at it. And I've got my class also working with high school kids in the collaboration, because it's their job to mentor the next generations. And I'm hoping it sparks it that way, because we laughed and they were like, well, what does a creative person look like? Because again, a lot of them are analytics. They're scared to say the creative. I'm like, a creative adult is an inner child that survived. And that's all it is. Being able to play and see the world in all types of ways and get rid of your filters and rules sometimes, that's creativity. That's all it is. It's allowing yourself to take risks, make mistakes, and be okay with it. And so I tell them that's the way you should approach life. We'll see if it works.
You have a few years to see if that worked.
That's true.
So let's actually, I know we have a very short minute. This 30-minute goes by really quickly, but jumping back into why we're here, solving innovation challenges with design thinking. For those of us that are past that age, right, and we are in an organization or in a position within a company where, we're asked to solve tough challenges. What are some of, from your perspective, you have a very diverse background, what do you think is like the toughest challenge the industries are facing today? And kind of tacking on to that with my two-part questions, what is it that they can do, maybe the very first step of design thinking you think they can implement today or in the very near future that could help them get started? Because I think that tends to be the hardest part, is getting started.
So if you're an established business, the hardest part is competition, right? Competition is, the world's gotten really small with technology. I can order things from any part of the world and be delivered to my house within days. And companies are also flooding the market with similar and same old technologies and products. And I think where design thinking can help that is understand your customer. A lot of times it's about the story of the product more than it is the product, because products are duplicated all the time. But it's the story in which you can attach emotional attachment of a product to me. And that's the biggest thing. And I think that's what design thinking opens up, is the possibilities of being able to stand beside your customer with the story of a product and not just giving them something that's just another widget. And so if it was one thing that I wish companies would do that would probably make the biggest impact. Find you an empathy map and know it. Know how to answer that question from a consumer's point of view, and then flip it and see what the consumer thinks of you. Because a lot of times what they think you are is completely different what you think you are. And that to me is the biggest impact for the smallest investment that any company can do within the design thinking process.
Very good. So can you, for those of us that may not be familiar with empathy map, what are the key elements, if you could share that verbally, because I think it could make a huge impact based on what you're sharing. I think if we can have a basic understanding what that is, maybe we can convince some of our audiences to take that first step in jumping into this process.
Okay, so you can find them. I mean, there's templates everywhere, right? So the empathy map is section by section, and you're breaking down a demographic, a customer, a person, whatever you're looking at. And it breaks it down into, what do this person or this group of people, what do they think? What do they hear? What do they do? What do they believe in? What frictions in life do they have? And it works you all the way around where you're answering these small questions under this large category, and you're having to put yourself into their situations. And it works you all the way back around to the center point that's usually pains and gains, right? What are negative things about them that you need to avoid? And what are the positive things about them that you need to incorporate when you start thinking and developing? And so once you have that, I could give you my study, and it's almost as if I know how that person's going to react to certain developments within a company. And I think that is invaluable.
Great. Well, thank you, Owen. I know I just clicked onto the next slide, but I want to share, these tools. I'm going to try to see if I can find a template that's maybe we already have at Bridge that can share with everyone, or maybe one that's open source online. And as a follow-up, for those of you that signed up for the for the live conversation or joined now, and I would say design thinking, as Owen shared, kind of in waves. We understand that too. It's not a skill that you just acquire overnight. It
Right.
takes practice. We're actually just having some conversations of like, how do we help students learn design thinking and apply that? So plugging in that there are opportunities at Bridge Innovate. We have a design thinking master series that's launching in 2020. So if you are interested, on the page here, we have bridgeinnovate.com for upcoming events, including the design thinking mastery series. And if you have any questions about Bridge Innovate, here's my email address, mkim@bridgeinnovate.com, to set up a time to talk. We'll also share Owen's LinkedIn page as well as mine as a follow-up. So if you're interested in connecting with Owen and hearing more about, his point of view with design thinking, and his just has a wealth of experience, especially also working with students in the education sector, we'll go ahead and send that out to everyone. So I didn't see any questions come in. So Owen, you must have done an excellent job today.
Or scared them all off, either way.
Maybe. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. Again, if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll send that information out there. And I hope you all have a good rest of the day. Thank you for joining Bridge Innovate's Inspire series.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Owen.